Hey, I am super overdue giving an update on Washington Black. I did finish it about a week ago, and apparently I didn't record a message. So I'll say that the biggest thing I ran into with this book, as I talked about in my original update, was the fact that I just really was in the mood for a heavy piece of historical fiction with darker, depressing themes at the center of it, especially at the start. It's just not the kind of book that I'm drawn to in the summer where I'm just dying of heat stroke in the beautiful weather in a good way. Yeah, I really like the weather here when it's warm. So anyway, so a little bit was just the struggle that it would just didn't feel like the type of book I typically would pick up in the summer. And again, no fault of the book club. I'm not trying to pass the buck or anything. That it's always the challenge with any kind of book club where you're trying to perfectly line up people's mood with a scheduled planned book. It's the same thing even with book, like when I do something for, even just buddy read. Anyway, but with the book, like it was so well written. The characters were well developed. And admittedly, like once I got past part one, which is I think where I recorded my original thoughts, it was good to see the stories that moved along and was again more about the characters' progression. And so, we follow them through Barbados and the slavery and getting out of that and like moving in the States. And I really did like the parts with the girl, Tana, I believe was how you say it. I did the physical book, or the ebook rather, so I didn't get to hear how some of it was pronounced. But again, just hear like their story and just, I don't know, it's just a tough story that I think it's, overall an optimistic, positive story at the end of the day. But somehow, yeah, I just wasn't feeling it despite it being a really, really good book. And I think that's always the worst is when, again, as reviewers, are we reviewing our experience with the book, or are we reviewing the book objectively and being like, hey, this book is way better than how I feel about reading it, if that makes sense. The other thing, and this is just like a funny note, is that I think the book felt incredibly American because a lot of it takes place in the States. And I think thematically, because the States has a longer running history of slavery being like, a much larger part of the American narrative. Like, don't get me wrong, Canada, we have our whole other problems, but like largely, I think, just the slavery piece is just so much more, just like there's a lot more that happened and longer that happened in the States, down south and all that, that it just was kind of an interesting book that it was, and very much like it was a Canadian book by a Canadian author, apparently very well known here. I'm just like living under a rock. But unfortunately, it just was a case where, what was I going to say? Just a case where the book was, it felt like I was reading an American book and I just didn't know it. Anyway, I got to get back to things here, but I'd say like very much appreciated. I liked it a lot more as I went on, but mostly I'm relieved to be done a really long book that I wasn't enjoying a lot, and a book that I felt really bad for not enjoying because the book is objectively very good, and I'm definitely the problem here. All right, talk later, bye.